The night before the bar examination, Toby Whitmore disabled every alarm in the building. I discovered this at 3:47 a.m. when I woke naturally from a restless dream about civil procedure and noticed that the emergency exit sign in the hallway was dark. The corridor was silent, not the ordinary silence of a sleeping dormitory, but something deeper and more absolute. The hum of the vending machines was gone. The buzz of the fluorescent lights was gone. Even the faint, ever-present vibration of the building's ventilation system had ceased. The entire structure was holding its breath. Toby was standing at the end of the hallway, his silhouette framed by the pale moonlight filtering through the stairwell window. He was holding a screwdriver in one hand and the detached faceplate of the building's main alarm panel in the other. His expression, when he turned to face me, was one of beatific innocence, the look of a child who had just presented his mother with a handful of wildflowers he had picked from a neighbor's garden without permission. "I just wanted everyone to wake up naturally," Toby whispered, his voice trembling with that particular quality of earnest fragility that had made him the darling of our entire graduating class. Toby doesn't want anyone's heart to race on the most important day of their lives. People who are truly capable don't need buzzers to save them. I stared at him. I had known Toby for 3 years, and in that time, I had learned that his gentle, childlike demeanor was a weapon, a shield behind which he committed acts of breathtaking selfishness, while the rest of the world cooed over his sensitivity. He had accidentally deleted a classmate's research paper because the screen brightness gave him a headache. He had inadvertently taken credit for a group project because he forgot to mention his partner's contributions. He had been coddled and excused and protected by an institution that saw his fragility as something precious rather than something predatory. But this was beyond anything he had done before. The bar examination was not a midterm. It was the single most important test of our professional lives, the gatekeeper between us and the careers we had spent 3 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars pursuing. Missing the exam meant waiting an entire year for the next administration, and in the hyper-competitive world of corporate law, a year's delay was a career death sentence. In my previous life, I had gone from room to room, pounding on doors, shaking shoulders, dragging my classmates from their beds, till I had saved every single one of them. They all arrived at the examination on time. They all passed. They all went on to high-paying positions at prestigious firms, and they all hated me for what happened next. Because Toby, confronted by the dormitory dean about his stress-free plan, had fled to the rooftop in tears. A sudden cold wind had triggered his severe asthma. He had died alone in the freezing air, his inhaler clutched in a hand that couldn't lift it to his lips, and my classmates, the people I had woken, the people I had saved, blamed me for his death. "If you hadn't made such a big deal about the alarms," Rachel said, her voice calm and reasonable, "Toby would still be alive. What was the harm in sleeping a little longer? We all would have woken up eventually." "She's right," Marcus agreed. "Toby wasn't malicious. He was just trying to help. And you had to be the hero. You had to knock on every door. You couldn't just let it go." The graduation farewell dinner was held at a rented penthouse 6 months after the bar exam that I had passed. They had all passed. We were all lawyers now, scattered across the city's most prestigious firms. I thought the dinner was a reconciliation, a chance to heal the wounds that had festered since Toby's death. I was wrong. They locked me on the balcony. Rachel, my mentor, the woman I had admired since my first day of law school, the woman who had taught me how to write a brief and how to address a judge and how to survive in a profession that devoured women like us, stood behind the double-pane glass and watched me pound on the door. She watched me sink to my knees in the bitter January cold. She watched me shiver and beg and plead, my breath fogging the glass between us, my fingers going numb inside my gloves. "If you hadn't insisted on playing hero," she said, her voice muffled but perfectly clear, "Toby never would have gone to the rooftop. What difference would an extra half hour of sleep have made? Who cares? Anyone can write a brief. Did you think we were as useless as you? You love waking people up so much," she added, her lips curving into a small, cold smile. "Then stay awake forever." They left me there for 5 hours. By the time the janitor found me the next morning, I had hypothermia and frostbite in 3 fingers, and I never practiced law. The nerve damage made it impossible to hold a pen for more than a few minutes, and the psychological damage made it impossible to trust anyone enough to work alongside them. I spent the next decade watching from the margins as the people who had destroyed me built brilliant careers, won landmark cases, and raised toasts at alumni dinners to the memory of poor Toby, taken too soon. I died at 34, alone in a studio apartment, my law degree gathering dust on a shelf I couldn't reach. My last thought was a prayer for a second chance. And then I opened my eyes, and I was standing in the dark hallway of the pre-law dormitory, watching Toby Whitmore unscrew the faceplate of the alarm panel with his soft, uncalloused hands. I just wanted everyone to wake up naturally, Toby whispered. Toby doesn't want anyone's heart to race. I looked at him, that I looked at the screwdriver in his hand, that I looked at the dead alarm panel on the wall. And I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. The cold, quiet certainty of a woman who knew exactly what she was going to do. You're right, Toby, I said softly. Truly capable people don't need buzzers. Good night. I turned and walked back to my room. I closed the door. I pulled out the backup mechanical watch I had hidden in my coat lining, the one piece of technology Toby's sabotage couldn't reach. And I sat on the edge of my bed, fully dressed, watching the minutes tick toward dawn. Not this time. This time, I was going to let them sleep. The examination was scheduled for 8 a.m. at the Downtown Convention Center. AT 6:45 a.m., the dormitory was still silent. AT 7:15 a.m., it was still silent. At 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the exam doors closed, I walked out of my room and down the corridor. The hallway was a tomb, and alarms had sounded, and doors had opened. Every single one of my classmates, Rachel, Marcus, the entire graduating class that had once locked me on a balcony, was still asleep. I took the bus to the convention center, that I checked in, I took my seat. And at 8 a.m. sharp, when the proctor announced the start of the examination, I was the only one from my entire dormitory who was present. The bar exam lasts 2 days. I completed both days with the calm precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment through 2 lifetimes. And when the results were posted 6 weeks later, I had passed, not just passed, I had earned the highest score in the entire state. My classmates, the ones who had slept through the examination, were not on the list. They had missed their chance. The exam would not be offered again for another year. The aftermath was swift and merciless. The university launched an investigation into the alarm failure and the evidence. The tampered panel, the missing faceplate, the fingerprints that matched Toby's, was incontrovertible. The administration, desperate to avoid a lawsuit, offered to reschedule the exam for the affected students, but the damage was done. The major firms had already filled their incoming associate classes. The most prestigious clerkships had already been awarded. The lost generation of our dormitory was forced to wait an entire year, and during that year, the legal world moved on without them. Rachel confronted me at a coffee shop 3 months after the exam results were posted. She was not the cool, composed mentor I remembered. She was haggard and thin, her eyes ringed with dark circles, her voice trembling with fury. You did this on purpose. You knew the alarms were off, and you let us sleep. You murdered our careers the way you murdered Toby. Toby isn't dead, I said calmly. In this timeline, Toby is alive. He confessed to tampering with the alarms. He's in therapy now, working through the issues that made him believe he had the right to control everyone else's destiny. And you're exactly where you deserve to be. You told me once that anyone can write a brief, write one, in a year, when the next exam is offered. You'll regret this. I'll make sure every firm in the city knows what kind of person you are. I'm the kind of person who passed the bar exam, and I'm the kind of person who's going to spend the next 40 years being a better lawyer than you could ever have been. Because I didn't need a buzzer to save me, I saved myself. I picked up my coffee and walked out. Behind me, Rachel was shouting something, threats, pleas, accusations, but I didn't turn around. I had spent one lifetime turning around, hoping for justice that never came. I was done hoping, and the woman who had been frozen on a balcony was now the woman who held all the heat. Third-party objective commentary by Margaret Bastian, retired justice, State Supreme Court. The Whitmore bar exam incident has become a staple of legal ethics curricula, and for good reason. It presents a question that every first-year law student should be forced to confront. What do you owe to people who have demonstrated conclusively that they would sacrifice you without hesitation? Elena Vance's actions that night were not merely passive. They constituted a deliberate choice to withhold aid from people who had, in a previous iteration of her life, killed her. The law does not generally impose a duty to rescue, and Elena had no legal obligation to wake her classmates. But the question of moral obligation is more complex, and it is this complexity that has made her case a fixture of professional responsibility courses for 2 decades. What I find most compelling about the case is the way it exposes the architecture of institutional complicity. Toby Whitmore's tampering with the alarms was not an isolated act. It was the culmination of years of behavior that the university had systematically enabled. His fragility was treated as a get-out-of-accountability-free card, and his classmates, Rachel chief among them, were willing participants in this arrangement because it served their interests. Elena was not merely fighting Toby. She was fighting an entire culture that had decided in advance who mattered and who could be sacrificed. Rachel's role in the original timeline is particularly instructive. She was Elena's mentor, and her betrayal, locking Elena on the balcony after framing her for Toby's death, was the deepest cut of all. It revealed that the relationship Elena had believed was built on mutual respect was, in Rachel's mind, purely transactional. Elena was useful until she became inconvenient. The moment her usefulness ended, Rachel discarded her without a second thought. Elena's decision to let the class sleep is often debated, but what is rarely discussed is what she did afterward. She passed the bar. She built a career. She founded a legal aid clinic. She became a judge. She did not let the bitterness of her experience poison her. She simply refused to save people who had proven they would not save her. That is not cruelty. It is the most rational allocation of moral resources I have ever seen. The dormitory building where the incident occurred has since been renamed Vance Hall, and every incoming student is told the story on their first day. Not as a warning, but as a reminder. The law rewards those who show up, and those who rely on others to wake them will, eventually, find themselves alone in the dark. I am 57 years old now, and I sit on the bench of a state Supreme Court, the youngest justice ever appointed to this circuit, and I hear cases that shape the law for millions of people. My chambers are lined with books and briefs, and a single photograph of the pre-law dormitory at my old university. The building has been renamed Vance Hall, and every first-year student who walks through its doors is told the story of the woman who passed the bar exam while her entire class slept. Rachel works at a small personal injury firm in a suburb 2 hours from the city. She never made partner. She never argued before a higher court. She never became the lawyer she had promised herself she would be. The last I heard, she was handling slip-and-fall cases for a contingency fee, her name absent from every directory of the city's legal elite. Marcus left the law entirely. He sells real estate now, in a market that has been stagnant for a decade. The others scattered, some to small firms, some to non-legal careers, some to lives of quiet desperation in the margins of a profession that had no room for lawyers who had failed their first and most important test. The class that had called me useless learned, one by one, who was truly capable. And the woman who had knocked on every door in her first life learned, in her second, that some doors are better left closed.